You're back. Tonight we're covering 4chan posts that are messed up and deeply disturbing. The kind that sit with you. Like the video, subscribe, close the door, and we'll get into it. I drove the same man 3 times a week for almost 3 months before he asked me to take him somewhere that didn't exist on any GPS. This was March 2022. I was doing private car work in DC, mostly corporate clients, not Uber. The service I worked for had contracts with law firms, lobbyists, a couple of think tanks, and every so often someone from the government side who needed a discreet ride and didn't want a black SUV parading them around. That's who my regular was. Older guy, maybe late 60s. Thin, gray, expensive coat. He always sat behind the passenger seat, always kept a leather folder on his lap, and he never used his phone in the car. Not once. I called him Mr. K in my head because the dispatcher only ever gave me a last initial. He was polite, said good morning, said thank you, tipped in cash at the end of each month with a little handwritten note that said the same thing every time. Appreciated. That was it. No name, no signature. Our route was almost always the same. I'd pick him up at a building near DuPont Circle a little before 7, drop him at one of 3 places downtown, wait if he asked, take him back. Sometimes we'd swing by a cozy on 19th so he could grab tea. Earl Grey, no sugar, no lid on the cup because he said the plastic changed the taste. I liked him. That's the part I keep coming back to. He was easy work, so when he asked me on a Wednesday if I could take him to an address that afternoon, I said sure without thinking. He gave me the address. I typed it in. Nothing came up. I typed it again. Same result. The map jumped back to the last known place, the way it does when it doesn't recognize what you gave it. I told him the GPS wasn't finding it, and he said, calm as anything, I can give you coordinates. I'd never had a client do that before. He read them off from a small notepad. Latitude, longitude, out to 5 decimal places. I punched them into Waze and got a pin dropped in a neighborhood off North Capitol, up past Michigan Avenue. Row houses. Nothing weird about it on paper. Just an area I didn't usually drive through. We got there in about 20 minutes. The building at the pin was a plain 2-story row house. Red brick, black railings, a plastic recycling bin by the steps that hadn't been brought back in from the curb. There was a kid's chalk drawing on the sidewalk. A sun with a face on it, half rained away. He said, please wait, 15 minutes, don't leave the car. I said no problem. He walked up the steps and rang the bell. Someone opened the door. I couldn't see who. He went in. The door closed. I sat there. I watched the timer on my phone. 15 minutes is longer than you think when you're staring at a house and told not to leave. At about 11 minutes in, a woman across the street came out to check her mail and looked at my car for a long time. Longer than a normal look. She didn't say anything, and she didn't wave. She just stood there, holding her mail against her chest, and watched me. Then she went back inside. A dog barked somewhere at the end of the block. One sharp bark, then nothing. A UPS truck rolled past and the driver looked at me too. In that kind of neighborhood, someone sits in a car with the engine off in the middle of the afternoon. People notice. At 15 minutes exactly, the door opened and he came out. I want to be careful here because I've thought about this a lot and I don't want to make it more than it was. He walked down the steps at the same pace as before. Same coat, same leather folder in his hand. Same face. I saw his face clearly, from maybe 20 feet in the mid-afternoon light, no mask, no scarf, nothing pulled up. He got in the car and sat where he always sat, behind the passenger seat, and he set the folder on his lap. He said, thank you. Back to DuPont, please. Same voice. I pulled away, and I couldn't tell you at what point exactly it started, but somewhere in the first block I felt like there was a stranger in my back seat. I checked the mirror. He was looking out the window. That was normal. He always looked out the window. But something about how he was doing it was wrong. Before, he'd tilt his head slightly, follow a building with his eyes, if it interested him, then look back down at his folder. That afternoon, he looked out the window like someone watching a movie in a language he didn't speak, attentive but not connected to what he was seeing. At a light on Massachusetts Avenue, I glanced up in the mirror again. A woman was crossing the street with 2 kids. He watched them cross the way you'd watch someone doing arithmetic in front of you, and you weren't sure they'd get to the right answer. I told myself I was tired. It had been a long week. Maybe he was too. Maybe whatever he'd done in that house had upset him, or bored him, or he was just working something out in his head. He'd earned the right to sit in a car for 20 minutes without me analyzing his posture. Somewhere near Rhode Island Avenue, I said, everything all right, sir? He said, yes, thank you. Same voice, same words he'd have used any other day. And still, when he said it, I felt the hair on the back of my arms lift, and I couldn't tell you why. I dropped him at DuPont. He got out and walked away, didn't look back. He never did. That night, I sat in my apartment with the TV off and tried to work out what had bothered me. Whatever it was, I couldn't name it. It wasn't his face. His face was fine. It wasn't his voice. His voice was fine. It was something in between. A weight, a center of gravity that had moved a couple inches to the left. I kept coming back to the folder. In 3 months, I'd never seen him not open it in the car. He'd flip to a page, read, close it, open it again. That afternoon, he just held it on his lap like a prop. I drove him twice more that week. Both rides were normal on paper. He said good morning. He said thank you. He looked out the window. But I started noticing small things. He didn't ask for tea. He didn't open the folder once. On Friday, he put his seatbelt on wrong, then corrected it, then looked down at the buckle for a second too long, the way you look at something you've been told about but never used. The next Monday, the dispatcher called and said Mr. K had requested a different driver, no reason given. She said it happens, don't take it personal. I said sure, I didn't take it personal. A few weeks later, I was on my phone, scrolling through news out of habit, and I saw him. Some official event, a photo on one of the political sites. He was standing at the back of a group, in a coat I recognized, holding what looked like the same leather folder. The caption named him. It was a real name. A title I won't repeat. I zoomed in on the photo. I sat with it for a long time. I put my phone down, made coffee, came back, picked it up again. I compared it to what I remembered from the car. The face in the photo was his face, and I still couldn't shake the feeling that I'd driven 2 different men that month, and only one of them had gotten out of that row house. I closed the tab. I didn't save the picture. I didn't look him up again after that. Some things you can chase and some things you leave alone. The kind of work I do, you learn pretty quick which is which. I was paid for the ride and I went home. I still drive in DC. I don't take that route through North Capitol if I can help it. It's not because anything happened there. Nothing happened there, as far as I know. That's kind of the point. The first thing that felt off was that he wouldn't sit down. I run a small kennel outside Colorado Springs, up past the reservoir where the pines start getting serious. Basic obedience, some protection work, a lot of pet dogs whose owners waited 2 years too long. October is my busy season. People get their dogs in September after summer camping trips wreck their manners, and by Halloween, I'm booked solid. He called on a Tuesday, wanted a slot for a Malinois, said the dog was green and needed the foundation package. That's a lie you hear sometimes from people who don't want to admit they messed up an older dog, so I didn't think much of it. Told him to come by Thursday for the intake. He showed up in a clean gray Tacoma, late 30s, maybe 40, ball cap pulled low, not tall, not big, just compact, the kind of guy you'd forget in a gas station line. He said his name was Cal. The dog was the thing. She came out of the truck like water, 65 pounds, brindle mask, the kind of muscle you only get from real work. Malinois are electric by default, all vibration and want to. This one was quiet, not sedated quiet, watching quiet. She stood at his left heel without a leash, without a command, without a glance up at his face. I've been doing this 14 years. You develop a nose for dogs that have been through something. I offered them the office, coffee, the whole routine. He said he'd rather stand. Thanks. Fine. I pulled out the intake sheet and started the usual questions. Age, vet history, where'd you get her? Breeder in Oklahoma, he said. 2 years old this month. I asked her name. Rita. I asked what she knew. He shrugged. Not much. Sits. Comes when I call. That's about it. I looked at Rita. Rita looked at nothing. Here's the thing. When you say a Malinois' name in the same room as the Malinois, the dog reacts. Ear flick, weight shift, something. Rita didn't move, not a millimeter, and Cal said her name like a man who'd practiced it in the mirror. I stood up to grab a leash from the wall hook. That's when it happened the first time. I took maybe 3 steps toward Cal to hand him the intake form. Rita was between us before I registered movement. Not lunging, not growling, just there, planted, her shoulder against his shin, her eyes on my sternum. When I stopped, she stayed. When I stepped back, she relaxed and settled again at his heel. Cal didn't say a word to her, didn't touch her, didn't even look down. She's protective, I said, keeping my voice easy. Yeah, she does that. Did you train that? No. A pause. She taught herself. I laughed a little, because that's what you do. Cal didn't laugh. I tried it twice more during the intake, to be sure. Once to reach past him for a pen on the counter, once to hand him a business card. Both times, same thing. Rita moved before I did, put herself squarely in the 2-meter bubble around him, and held there until I backed off. She wasn't aiming at me, she wasn't showing teeth, she was blocking, the way a bodyguard steps between a principal and a camera. I've seen protection dogs. I've trained protection dogs. Protection is loud. It's a bark and a hard eye. What Rita was doing had no cue and no noise. It was surveillance countermeasure. That's the phrase that came into my head in the office and wouldn't leave. I asked Cal if he'd worked with a trainer before. He said no. I asked if she'd been through a program at the breeder. He said no. I asked if anyone else had owned her. Just me. I told him I needed to walk out and grab paperwork from the barn, and I'd be right back. I left them in the office. Once I was outside, I stood in the gravel for a second and looked at the truck. Colorado plates, new, no dealer frame, no decal on the back window, no dog hair on the passenger seat that I could see through the glass, which is strange for a Mal you've owned since 8 weeks. There was a woman's hair tie on the gear shift, thin, pink, the kind kids wear. I went back inside and told him I'd need a couple of days to check my schedule before I could confirm the slot. He didn't like that. His jaw worked once. I was told you had openings this month. I did. I've had 2 intakes today. I want to make sure I place Rita in the right group. He looked at me for a long second. Rita looked at me for the same long second, and I swear to God their heads tilted at the same angle. Sure, he said. I'll wait to hear from you. They walked out. Rita never broke position. She got in the truck without a command. He shut the door on her and drove off slow, like the gravel was ice. I sat in the office for a while after that. I called a guy I know at CSPD. Retired K9 handler, does some consulting for me when I get bite cases. I gave him the first and last name off the intake sheet and asked him to run it as a favor. Told him I had a bad feeling and I'd owe him a bottle. He called back the next morning, quiet for a beat before he said anything. 2 restraining orders, one in Colorado, one in New Mexico. Both closed, meaning either expired or the petitioner stopped renewing. Different women. Nothing criminal on the sheet, no assault, no stalking charge that stuck. Just the paper trail of 2 women in 2 states who at some point had told a judge they were afraid of him. I thanked him and hung up and stood in the barn for a while, listening to my own dogs breathe. I emailed Cal that afternoon. Told him I'd looked at my group makeup and Rita wasn't going to be a fit for the current cohort due to incompatibility with the other dogs on the roster. Offered a refund of the intake fee, which he hadn't paid, which I hoped he'd notice as a way of saying, please don't come back. Kept it professional. Signed off. He didn't reply. Then I did the thing I keep going back and forth on whether I should have done. I'd taken a photo of Rita during the intake. Standard procedure, we photograph every dog for the file. I posted it to a private Facebook group for working dog people in the Mountain West, maybe 400 trainers and handlers. Wrote a short note. Female Mal, roughly 2 years, brindle mask, small nick on the left ear. Displays trained interposition behavior towards strangers, approaching handler, no verbal or physical cues from handler, anyone recognize her. The post sat there most of the evening. Around 10, a guy from Grand Junction messaged me directly. He said he'd trained that exact dog, ear nick and all, October of the previous year, 6-week board and train. He remembered her because she was the fastest Mal he'd ever run, and because she was sweet, actually sweet, licked his kids through the fence. He remembered the owner too. He pulled up his own intake photo and sent it over. Different man. Older, heavier, gray beard. Nothing like Cal. He said the owner had picked her up in November and he'd never heard from either of them again. Different name on the paperwork too, not Cal's. I read that message 3 times. I locked the gate that night, which I don't usually do until the first snow. I sat on the porch until the security light kicked off from stillness and then kicked back on when a rabbit crossed the yard. Rita, or whatever her name really was somewhere out there, sleeping between him and a door. The contract came through in late August 2021. A mine outside Mullins, in southern West Virginia, needed to be sealed for good. The company that owned it had folded years back. The paperwork sat in a state office for 2 decades, and now it fell on my desk. My job is decommissioning. I go into places that are being shut for the last time, and I certify they are safe to close. I got there on a Tuesday. The mine sat at the end of a gravel road that hadn't been graded since the Clinton administration. Kudzu was eating the guardrail. The tipple was rust, and the outbuildings looked like they had been kicked in from the inside by weather. The guy who met me at the gate went by Reese, maybe 60, wore a Cabela's cap so old the logo had gone pink. He worked for the county now, but had worked this mine as a boy. "You're the one going down," he said. "That's me." He looked at the shaft house like a man watching a dog he used to own. We did the pre-check for 2 hours. Ventilation was dead. My gear handles that. Gas readings came back low, but not 0, so I set up a fan at the top for insurance. The cage still worked, which surprised both of us. Reese ran it for me from up top. He was not going down. The mine had officially closed in 1999. The last men out sealed the working faces, killed the pumps, and walked away. A fire on level 3 in 97 had taken out a big section, and after that, the seams weren't worth it. The company shut the doors on paper and left the mine to rot. My job was the final walk. Confirm no equipment running, confirm no active seep, then a private outfit would come in with concrete. I went down at 10 in the morning. On the way down, I could feel the temperature drop through my coveralls, that flat mineral cold you only get underground. My headlamp caught the rock as we dropped past it. Ribs of coal, streaks of pyrite. The main haulage was in decent shape. I checked the pump room. Dry. I checked the shop. Empty. Tools long since scavenged. I was on my way back to the cage when I noticed the side drift. It wasn't on the current map, it was on an older one. A fold-out sheet from the 70s I had brought along out of habit. A short lateral off the main, no crosscut, just a dead spur that went maybe 200 feet and stopped. It was marked with a small letter A in pencil, and nothing else. Old spurs turn up in these workings. Some were sunk to chase a false lead, some held powder. It should have taken me 10 minutes to clear this one and cross it off. The mouth was low, I had to duck, the floor was uneven, and the timber overhead was original, black with age, still holding. My boots made a sound I did not like on that floor, a soft grating that meant fine coal dust and something else. I did not stop to think about the something else. The drift ran straight, 200 feet, give or take. At the end, my lamp caught a wall of solid rock, a blind heading. Someone had started to drive it and then quit. I stepped up to the wall to confirm the seal, and then I lowered my lamp. The rock at the bottom of that wall was ordinary. Coal, shale, the usual. About knee-high, that changed. There were marks. I thought at first they were tool marks, the kind a pick would leave, and I reached out to feel them, because that is what I always do. My glove came back with black dust and a thin, dry powder that was not coal. The marks were not tool marks, they were narrow, curved, in sets of 4, sometimes 5. They started at knee height and went up the wall past my shoulder. Hundreds of them, thousands. The wall was covered. In some places the grooves overlapped, one set crossing another, and the ones on top were deeper than the ones underneath. Fingernails. I stood there with my lamp on the wall, and I did not move for a long time. My breath sounded loud in my mask. I could hear the tick of my own gas meter. The temperature in the drift was 2 degrees lower than the haulage. My meter said so. I remember looking at it because it was easier than looking at the wall. I told myself it was a hoax. Kids get into old mines. Somebody could have come down here with a stick and made marks for a joke. Then I saw the numbers. At eye level, in the middle of all those scratches, someone had carved dates. Not deep, just enough to hold. They were in a column, one under the other, the way a man crosses days off a calendar. The earliest was neat, the later ones got worse. Toward the bottom, the numbers were shaky, like the hand had trouble closing. I counted them without meaning to. There were a lot. The last date was September 14th, 2006. 15 years, almost to the week, before the day I was standing there. I did not touch anything after that. I backed out of the drift the way you back out of a room where a large animal is sleeping. I got to the cage and signaled up. On the ride up, I could not stop thinking that whoever had made those marks had been alone down there. So had I. Reese saw my face when I came out. He didn't ask. I called the state that afternoon, then the sheriff. 2 days later, a forensics team went down. They were down for 11 hours. When they came up, the lead investigator, a woman named Delia, sat with me on the tailgate of her truck and told me what they had. No body, no clothing, no pack, nothing at all on the floor of the drift, and the floor had been raked at some point, either by a person or by slow water. She said the shale in that section was soft and wet, and would take a long time to give something back, if it ever did. The scratches were human. Their pathologist said so before he sent samples out. There was tissue in some of them, dried into the rock. There were partial prints in the coal dust up where the marks got the highest, and the fingertips that made those prints had no nails left. The dates lined up. From 1999, when the mine was closed on paper and nobody was supposed to be inside, to September of 2006, they ran missing persons through 5 states and got a long list and no match anyone was willing to swear to. How he got in and how long he stayed, they couldn't say. The main haulage had been walked twice by inspectors in that period. The lateral was not on the current map. Neither man had gone down it. They sealed the mine 3 weeks later. Concrete plug at the portal, another at the shaft collar. I stood on the pad while a man from the state read the closure order out loud. When he finished, he handed me the clipboard. I signed the acceptance. Under my signature, there was a box for the date. I filled it in, handed the clipboard back, and walked to my truck. I still do this work. I sign papers every week. There is always a date box. Every time I write the day and the month and the year, I think about the column of numbers on that wall, and I think about the last one, and I try not to do the math on how many days that is. Most of the time I don't. Sometimes when I'm tired, I do. The first time I noticed a body in the wrong drawer was my second week on the job, and I figured I was the one who'd screwed up. I was 3 months out of school, doing a rotation with the county medical investigator's office in Albuquerque, and the last thing I wanted was to walk in on day 15 and say the words, "Somebody moved a corpse." So I checked my paperwork twice. The John Doe from the I-40 wreck was supposed to be in drawer 14. He was in 9. Tag was right. Wristband was right. He was just in the wrong hole in the wall. I asked Hector about it. He was the senior ME on my rotation. Been there since the 90s, drank his coffee out of a balloon Fiesta mug that had lost most of its color. He didn't even look up. Techs mix them up when they roll them back after transport. It happens. I asked how often. Often enough that I don't chase it anymore. That was October 4th, 2017. The balloon fiesta was going that weekend, and every morning I'd see them over the Sandias and think how weird it was that the same city had that and had us. I let it go for about a week. Then it happened again. A woman, natural causes, 91 years old, moved from 3 to 22. Then a young guy, GSW, moved from 18 to 6. Both times, tags intact. No note in the transfer log. That's when I started my own list. Not a real journal, just a folded sheet of paper in the back of my locker. Date, case number, drawer assigned, drawer found. Nothing fancy. I told Hector I was doing it, and he shrugged like I was wasting my time, which was fine, because I kind of thought I was too. 4 weeks in, the sheet had 11 entries. Something else showed up on the sheet without me meaning to put it there. Every single move happened on a night when only one person was working the floor. A quiet night. One tech, one card swipe after 10, nobody else logged in. I started paying attention to who was on those nights. Most of the time it was a guy named Ellis, night tech. Been there maybe 2 years. Quiet, polite, ran the autoclave better than anyone. Ate the same turkey sandwich out of a Whole Foods bag every shift. I'd say hi to him in the parking lot when our schedules crossed, and he'd nod and keep walking. I didn't want it to be him. I want to be honest about that. I liked the guy, or liked him fine, and I also knew what it would look like if a 3-month intern started pointing fingers at a 2-year employee, so I decided to look at the cameras before I said anything to anybody. We had 2 cameras in the cooler bay, one over the door, one at the far end aimed back down the row of drawers. Footage lived on a server upstairs for 60 days. As an intern, I didn't have direct access, but I had a friend in IT who owed me a favor. He pulled the raw files onto a thumb drive and told me not to tell anybody. I watched the first one at home on a Tuesday night, the night of the 91-year-old. Camera 2, back of the bay, aimed at drawers 1 through 24, timestamp in the corner. I skimmed forward at 8 times speed with a beer in my hand, expecting nothing. At 2:17 a.m., the frame froze. Not blacked out, just held. The timestamp kept climbing. 2:18, 2:19, 2:30, 2:45. The frame did not change. Not a light shift. Not the compressor cycling. Nothing. At 2:57 a.m., the frame updated. Same angle. Nothing visibly different. The timestamp kept climbing normally after that. 40 minutes. I sat there and drank the rest of the beer without tasting it. The next morning, I pulled up the second night. The GSW, same camera. 1:44 a.m. Frame holds. 2:24 a.m. Frame updates. 40 minutes almost to the second. I did 4 more nights over the following week. Everyone had a hold, not always at the same clock time, but always around 40 minutes, always on a night that matched my paper list. I'm not a video guy, I don't know how to talk about codecs, but I know what a real quiet room looks like on a camera at 2 a.m., and I know what a still image looks like, and these were still images. Somebody had grabbed a frame, dropped it in, and let the clock keep moving over the top of it. That's when I got scared. Not scared of a body. Scared of the fact that whoever was doing this knew the system well enough to make the footage lie, and knew the schedule well enough to only do it when the building was empty except for them. I did one more thing before I talked to anyone. I got my IT friend to pull the file metadata, not the video, the file itself. Creation date, modification date. On every night I'd flagged the file had a modification timestamp about 3 hours after the shift ended. The rest of the nights, the modification timestamp matched the end of the recording window, like it was supposed to, so somebody was going back in, after the fact, from somewhere in the building, and editing the file. I did not go to Hector. I did not go to the morgue director. I didn't know how far this went, and I wasn't going to hand the paperwork to the person who might have been signing off on it. I called the county chief medical investigator's office directly, said I was an intern on rotation, said I needed 15 minutes, and said I wasn't comfortable sending it in an email. She gave me 20. I brought the thumb drive, my paper list, and a printout of the metadata with the timestamps highlighted in yellow. I told her everything I just told you, and then I shut up and waited. She looked at the printout for a long time. Then she said, "Don't come back to that facility tomorrow. I'll route you to the south office for the rest of the rotation." She didn't say thank you, and she didn't say I was right. She picked up the phone as I was standing up and asked somebody to hold her afternoon. Internal review opened 3 days later. I heard about it from an email that went out to all staff, worded so blandly you could have read it as a fire drill notice. Ellis stopped showing up on the schedule the following week. Someone in the break room said he was on leave. 2 weeks after that, someone else said he'd been let go. Nobody said why, and I did not ask. I finished my rotation at the South office. When I came back for my exit interview at the main facility in early December, drawer 14 had a fresh strip of new label tape on it, whiter than the others, and everything else looked the same. The final report on the review was not made public. I asked once, carefully, through a professor who had a friend in the office, and what I got back was that a policy about after-hours access to the cooler bay had been revised, and that the matter was considered resolved. Nobody ever told me why the bodies had been moved, not a theory, not even a guess. I have my own ideas, and I'm not going to write them down, because writing them down would make me sound like someone who thinks he knows, and I don't. I just know somebody spent 40 minutes at a time in a cold room, doing something to people who couldn't stop him, and then went back to his desk and edited the tape so it looked like the room had been empty the whole time. I kept the paper list. It's in a shoebox in my closet. I don't read it. That's where we pull the curtain closed and pretend we didn't see anything. Thanks for not looking away when things got dark. Which thread's living in your head? Tell me in the comments. There's so much more waiting in the collection. Guard your sleep. I'll see you soon.